All right, here we go. Carlie, how we doing?
We are excited, ready to go. I got my coffee.
I was just told that I'm supposed to talk with my hands. I think it's like a way to make people trust you more. So I'm gonna be like a lot of palms forward here for the group. But super excited to have you. Thank you so much for taking the time. There are very few people in the industry that we love more than Carlie. And I said we as in the Basepath family love more than Carlie. Carlie has become more than just someone who uses our platform. She is someone that has basically created an entire business around how to accelerate membership growth for collectives within the industry. I'm just going to give the quick kind of like bullet point intro, but like fill in the blanks here for me, Carly. But student athlete, field hockey in New Hampshire, worked in New Hampshire in athletic advancement. From there, went on to the pro side of the house, working for the Celtics. I think I've told you this, but my brother-in-law worked for the Celtics. Now he's on the Bruins side of the TD Garden family. Um, After the Celtics, I think this is a really interesting step, and it was moving to three step. For those of you that don't know, and Carly, honestly, I'd like to know a little bit more about three step, but as I understand it, kind of like youth sports, solutions started when there were like literally just 2 dozen folks, and a couple $1 million by the time you left. And through a lot of, Carly, I think your leadership and the team that you were part of built that into a 1,000+ employee company and over $500 million in revenue. Super interesting. We could spend the entire hour talking about that, but really kind of where we came into meeting you was you went from there to work at the Grove, which I'm super interested to hear kind of how that transition took place. I know the story a little bit, but definitely want to know more because that had to have been a very interesting one for you to go out of this crazy M&A driven, like hyper growth business into an incredibly nascent, new to the world, what is a collective model, and really kind of became the standard in the industry. And not, in I should say in large part because of the work that you and that entire team, Walker, Lauren, Tyler, and the group kind of put into building a very sustainable model on the membership side. And from there, we have actually had the great pleasure of working with Carlie at Basepath in full transparency as our lead on kind of the membership services side of the house. So we had no intention of getting involved in the services world at all. We were pretty comfortable being a software tech platform, but as we got to know Carlie and understand that there really is a best practices, there's a playbook that can be run. You can put some processes and systems and you know some of these ideas in place that make it really really meaningful to activate and bring in more and more folks to from the community and engaging them within the collective. And so we're super excited. Carlie's now working with us not just at the Grove but at a couple of other collectives in the country, and more by the day seemingly. And I'm sure after this call we'll probably have another handful that are going to want to be working with you, less so us, to help them. So sorry, that's my 4 minutes. You get the rest of them.
I gotta bring you everywhere with me.
No, we really appreciate it, Carly. Truly.
Oh, thank you for
Thanks so
having
much
me.
for taking the time.
Of course.
I do. I know Carly's got some materials that we're going to get into, and I think take some time to walk through different examples of what's worked, maybe what's not. Hit on some key principles and pillars as you're thinking about how to monetize your membership. Before we get into that, Carly, I would just love, like, how did the Grove come about, and like what was that like being there from day one to today, as they're now, like, again, I consider them the standard in the industry. They're doing things really really well. Certainly on the membership side, I think better than probably anyone else out there. So how did that all come to be? How did you get
Yeah,
involved?
it's a bit of the Walker Jones story that I was lucky enough to be a part of. But you mentioned three step, where I kind of had that jolt in my career that I got 5 years there that felt like 20 years of experience growing from an $8 million
Sure.
company to half a billion. And what we did there, I think there's a ton of similarities between what's happening in the NIL space, and it was growing youth sport club. So that's the teams, the local club teams, as well as nationally leading events. So a lot of our focus was M&A, bringing people in, and then my role was doing a bit of an audit on, all right, how do we get more people to go to their events? How do we get more people to play in their clubs? And that all kind of came down to what was the value of being part of that brand. So then at that point, Walker Jones was the CMO at Three Step, and he got the call from Lane to kind of come down to Ole Miss, his alma mater, and help do whatever it was 2 years ago that we were all kind of thinking, all right, let's try to figure this out. And I think the parallels from his previous agency career, as well as some of the stuff we did at Three Step, really we were able to set the foundation pretty easily with, all right, membership structures, tiers, events, leveraging a community. And we learned a lot of what not to do, a lot of what to do. And I was kind of head down there for a couple years, helping get that off the ground. And then Thomas, you and I had that conversation very recently, kind of earlier this year, where it was like, all right, I think I've figured out kind of a little bit of the sauce to all of this. It's not groundbreaking, it's not rocket science, but here's kind of the fundamental things that collectives can do to help grow their brand and focus on that membership piece and use Basepath, right? So it's like you get the new Basepath platform, and then you're like, all right, how do I get people into this? And that's kind of where you and I have had many conversations about that membership growth side.
Awesome. I'd love to hear about the fundamentals. And I know,
Oh,
again, you've got some slides to kind of walk through. Folks in the audience, again, kind of same rules apply. Like if you have questions, feel free to drop them into the Q&A. We'll probably take 20, 25, 30 minutes to kind of go back and forth with Carlie, just asking some questions that I've already gotten from some of the folks that knew we were talking to her. Yeah, please feel free to drop it in. We'll share over kind of, the materials, Carlie's information, all of that stuff kind of on the back end of this as we do with the normal kind of summary. So appreciate y'all, plugging in, and feel free to ask away as they come to your mind.
perfect. This is also my first like webinar where I can't see people's faces. So
I
I
know.
I feel like it's great to meet you all. Hopefully I'll be able to actually meet all of you at some point. I'm also born and raised Boston, so I apologize that I will speak too quickly. So if you need me to slow anything down or break anything down further, just wave a white flag and I can absolutely do that. But without further ado, I think that there's a couple things that we're going to focus on today. And everyone I know on this call is at a different starting point. So I'm going to speak pretty broadly just about some aspects of membership growth. But like Thomas said, I'm an open book. Definitely follow up one-on-one with specific things that you're going through with your collective, specific hurdles that you have, whether it's how to leverage your athletes, work with your athletic department, run a campaign, create landing pages, audit your website, whatever that is after this call. If you're like, I would love to pick your brain about that, please do. You'll have my contact information. Definitely call me with anything specific about your collective. Today, my hope is that you can take one or two things just broadly from this and apply it to you. So the biggest thing that I like to talk to collectives about is the focus on building a community, right? So I think that you have the advertising and the marketing piece of it, but like the community aspect of membership growth are tied hand in hand, right? So you need something where people can connect to your message and want to be a part of it. You want to create that kind of that fear of missing out effect. And that all comes down really to everything you do surrounding comes back to this community paywall. So collectives are split a little bit with major gifts and grassroots funding. Today, we're going to talk a lot about that grassroots funding, because what we see with membership platforms is that collectives are seeing about a 40% to 60% of their revenue coming in through membership platforms, and then the other bit being major gift funding. So I think there's a big piece of collectives that are focused on major gifts and fundraising, and then kind of forget that community building piece that comes with it. So I would encourage you guys at all times to go outside of collegiate sports. Look at other community building platforms, look at influencers, look at, I'm using this example of a family that travels. So they created this page here that's called the Bucket List Friends, and with access to that, you get travel deals, you get podcasts specific to the Bucket List Friends, you get special gifts. And that's really the crux of creating a community is getting access to, in our case, it's the athletes, but there's other examples out there where it's families, travel deals. Those are the types of places that you can learn a lot from, rather than just kind of this insular brand of like, all right, what are other collectives doing? Let's expand outside of that. What are other community building platforms doing? So a lot of the
I would
conversation,
say,
go ahead.
I would just say too, on top of that, we have seen that donor fatigue become a thing. If you're going to base 90% of your operational budget on, 4 or 5 people to fund the operations, if one of them leaves, you've lost, what, 17% of all the money that you need. Like, I think the memberships, the folks that are really doing things effectively are able to kind of, hey, if the donors come, that's wonderful, but we need to have a sustainable kind of like baseline to run this thing off of. And until you have that, you're kind of at the discretion of what those folks think. And if you had a tough season, maybe they're less inclined to do it again.
Totally. And we're in year 2 of this. So I think I've even had a lot of conversations where it's like, all right, we'll give you this $500,000, 250K as a match thing, but like I can't do this every year. So we're hearing a lot of that. And obviously that could change with the laws changing and all of the excitement around NIL. But I think regardless of where collectives go, community and this membership model is going to be sustainable because you're going to create this additional access that the fans get and that fans want to be a part of. So what we're talking about today is on Basepath. If you're in it, is kind of this recurring revenue. And I think another bonus of this, Thomas, to your point, is it's really hard to project out in the
Right.
NIL space right now. And if you have this recurring revenue,
Oh,
whether it's monthly or annually, it helps there.
it's so funny you say that. That is going to be one of the next things that I think we ultimately build is like true cash flow projections. Like that little snip at the bottom is what you see if you come into our platform. If you're managing members through us, but like actually helping folks understand like, hey, this is the cash flow coming in month 1 to 12, and then obviously the dollars going out at the same time. Because yeah, I mean, you may have a $500,000, that's recurring revenue. If it doesn't show up at the right time, you're in just as much trouble as having no money. So yeah, I think it's funny. I've been hearing that more and more recently. Is like the cash flow management is just as meaningful as making sure that the membership pool is growing.
And I think that having that focus on membership, the first thing I do when I talk to a collective is really do a quick audit of their website. And I think that that's, oh, so there's still a couple out there where one-time donations and memberships are put on the same level, but the value, to your point, of recurring revenue with a membership, whether it's monthly or annually, outranks typically the value of a one-time donation because you can predict that revenues that's coming in. So I like this example. I could have chosen from 100 different out there that really that call to action is joining the club and joining a membership. That's the first thing that I suggest kind of when diving in with collectives, that's really what they're pushing for their membership growth. And a thing to remember is that it takes time. A lot of words here, but effectively the key point to this is it takes any major subscription growth marketing company is going to tell you it takes like 16 to 20 different touch points with collectives to get that person to subscribe and to join. So it's going to feel like tireless efforts to just keep hitting your fan base and hitting your fan base. But if we can all get 10% of our fan bases to join the collective, we're all going to be pretty successful, right? So it's that constant interaction. And it's what does that look like? And there's a ton of different ways that those touch points can go. Majority of them are going to be through your athletes and through your athletic social channels. Because they have better reaches than the collectives directly. So, and a lot of people that are following your collective directly on social are going to be people who are already involved, already kind of have crossed that threshold. So I think that that's a pretty big point, is to make sure you're collaborating, making sure that you're engaging with your athletes, making sure that they're helping you grow your brand as part of being an ambassador for the collective. And then you also have your message boards, your paid ads, your email campaigns. And then something I like to see a lot of as well is in-game and at event. So look at how other brands activate. That's why I put this down here, is look outside of collectives. Look how brands activate. We see it every day in football, basketball, across the boards. Is how do you have a setup at the football game? How do you have a setup at the basketball arena where you can engage with fans, have conversations around it, and get those touch points face to face? And then that will convert to memberships and people knowing about your brand. So there's a lot of different touch points and ways that you can get in front of your collective people. But I think the biggest thing is to look outside of the box to see what other brands are doing and how they're growing as well.
That 16 to 20 is really interesting. I've never heard you use that exact number, or range. Like, I feel like that is something that a lot of folks get discouraged with, is like, hey, big announcement, we're on campus now, excited to be the new collective in town. And okay, we get 60 members, maybe half that, and they're like, what the hell? Like, I thought that this was going to be, we were going to get our $500,000 like day one, but it really is. There's a discipline to it. And like, you have to be willing to continue to reach out. I love the idea of using the athletes as like that kind of audience expander, because yeah, I mean, if someone is following your collective, they know about you. You need to be hitting the folks that haven't heard, if you're really trying to make that kind of incremental step.
Yeah, and I think that number can seem kind of intimidating, right? But there's so many different ways that can count as a touch point.
Right.
We listed all of them, but I think there also is a very easy way to do it, is just a standard that if you're promoting something, whether it's a campaign, event, a membership benefit, that any athlete who is an ambassador of the collective is sharing that on their feed. That's a touch point to anyone that follows them. Instagram collaborations, 100%. Anytime we're putting out content, it's either collaborating with the athletics department, it's collaborating with a team account, it's collaborating with an athlete that's featured. So all of that Instagram collaboration aspect then sends it out to their entire following as well as yours, and it just shows that unity between. So a touch
Just
point
just on that point,
yeah,
you brought the athletic department up, and sorry if I'm jumping the shark here, but
you're good.
like, how important is that to have that kind of like connection with the department and working hand in hand with them? Because a lot of collectives, I think, have nice working relationships. Some of them obviously don't. Um, like, for those maybe that don't, like, how do you help the athletic departments to kind of like understand the importance of this? And then for those that do have it, like, how do you best leverage it?
Yeah, I think that's the number one question we get asked, is how do you get them to believe in NIL? And how do you get, like, a lot of the pushback is from that competition of typically
Right.
like the fundraising department
You're
against
stealing my
NIL.
money.
A little bit, there is that. And you're not going to convince them by just arguing that NIL is important. I think there's ways to work around the athletic department should that pose a risk. Unfortunately, um, it's better, obviously, if everyone's on the same page and rowing in the same direction. Like, that goes without saying. But if your athletic department's not going to post for you, like, use your athletes. A lot of times the athletes' reach is just as broad as, and their storytelling is better than the athletics department as a whole. But I think showing up, showing your numbers. And then I think additionally, what I've seen candidly is getting coaches on board. If your athletic director or your foundation is a little bit more hesitant, getting coaches on board, interacting with coaches, getting them to support you. They know that NIL is important right now, especially with the portals and everything. So
That one
getting
feels
coaches
to me to be
involvement.
more the key is like
Mhm.
coach. Coach changes the narrative, internally and externally. Like, I mean, we've seen it at a couple of schools where, yeah, hey, maybe athletic department wasn't on board. There's a change in the head coaching position, new coach coming in. Hey, NIL is a part of this. Athletic department all of a sudden becomes a believer. It feels like that's happened more than once or twice to be a coincidence that, you know, coach is going to be the one to really kind of bring the department around on some of their fears.
Yeah, and I think that this is not unique to one. I mean, look, there's 3 questions that just came out up about this. I think it's
Right.
just no, it's not unique to you. Any athletic department that you see really working hand in hand, it's taken years to get to that point. And that's just going to be the personalities of the athletic director and butting heads, as well as some of the people that work in the development office thinking that you're stealing. It says right here, they feel our memberships are stealing their donors. I think now that could have been a concern 2 years ago when no one knew what NIL was. But I do think at this point, you can go to them and show the data of, all right, like how have we've been launched this NIL, we've pushed this, we've gotten this out there, our fan base knows about it. Have your donations really decreased? And how has that looked for you? And I think at the end of the day, there's ways to integrate also after point of purchase, right? So we don't need to put up the collective and season ticket renewals on the same email, but maybe as an entry point after you purchase your season tickets, you've already renewed, credit card has been swiped, then there's a pop-up for the collective. So the collective can still come secondary if it needs to athletics marketing campaigns. But there's ways I think that you can suggest it's integrated without competing directly with what we're
Sure.
seeing the athletics department's doing.
It's funny, we early on, we have the ability to ask survey questions and they can be different from, you know, one collective to the next. We had a collective that we were working with that specifically put in the survey questions like, are you an annual fund donor? Are you a season ticket holder? Just to try to understand like who these folks were and how they were coming to it. And yeah, basically sharing that data back with the department to help them kind of understand there's a lot of incrementality here. And there's a lot of folks that are connecting with the collective that have never connected with the department. And so, you know, what is it that's resonating with these folks on the collective side that, you know, the department hasn't been able to kind of hit them on in reality? Like there's actually some true benefit that could be had on the institutional side as well. Um, all of those again are, you know, layered with ego and personalities and, you know, fears and traditions that are never easy to just kind of turn over in one fell swoop. But I think the more you're able to bring data to the equation and demonstrate that there's true incrementality here, and it's not just a, you know, a zero sum game of a dollar that goes to the collective doesn't come to the department. It makes it obviously a little bit easier to have those conversations and overcome some of those obstacles.
Yeah, and I think I have a slide that talks to this, but I think pushing the narrative of the good side of NIL. There's a lot of negative press about NIL and athletes jumping from school to school. And so maybe your entry point with the athletic department is pushing the activation your athletes did at the Boys and Girls Club. It's pushing that community piece of it. It's pushing their engagement with fans. It's not saying like, hey, you want to win, join the collective. It's going in through a different entry point. But I have seen the collectives that are successful in getting athletic departments on board are the ones that just keep hammering a bit, and the ones that kind of ask for forgiveness a bit rather than permission of run this campaign with this athlete, do this, execute. You have access to these athletes who are ambassadors of your collective. Leverage that as far as you can, use them, and then the athletics department will see that content coming from them, and it will help them look good as an athletic department and create this win-win scenario by advertising and showcasing their athletes. So I don't have a foolproof plan of getting your athletic department on board. It's much more nuanced in every conversation, but my top suggestions would be work around them by working with the athletes. Secondary, work around them by working with the coaches. If the coaches are afraid of the athletics director, then utilize kind of your fan base also to be ambassadors. So giving your fans and your members content to put out, whether it's, hey, I'm a founding member of the collective and you should be too, or leveraging kind of that community aspect. And then I really think the message boards are a good way of working kind of around the around the athletic department to get directly to your fans in a place that you know where they exist. So hitting your customers where they are, and in that aspect, I think it is helpful. But I would say my third piece of advice there is stay consistent. Bring examples of what other collectives are doing in the space, whether it's collectives you aspire to be similar to, whether it's competitors in your conference, whether it's Power Five and you're not Power Five, whatever it is, bring examples and say, hey, this is what other schools are doing, because I think that fear of getting behind is the only thing that sometimes is going to convince people to flip the switch. I mean, I think Stanford's AD coming out in with that piece, that statement, I think last week or the week before, was a big tipping point. That's something that we didn't think would be happening, and now we saw that. And I think that's something where the collectives can come back to their idea and say, hey, like this is happening. People, a lot of people are finally like getting over that hump that took 2 years, and we're finally, seems like we're on the other side. So I think using other schools examples and coming back to them, but in the meantime, leveraging the reach you have with athletes. That's probably my best way to sum it up.
Love that.
We could do a whole webinar just on that.
I was gonna say you could, yeah, like diving into the nuances of how to win over an athletic department is probably its own separate webinar mini series.
And I think to that point is anytime you're running a campaign, of course it's helpful to have that collaboration, but it really, you can create your own community and your own sense of urgency by leveraging the moments that are happening. So a lot of the time that looks like a match campaign or a reason to join or a sweepstakes. But I think what we've seen with the data coming in is obviously incentive and urgency needs to be there with every campaign that you run. People have those touch points to learn about your collective, then they need a reason to purchase, right? They can't say, oh, I'll do it next week. You need to come up with different campaigns and different incentives, whether it's apparel, whether it's access to an event. That's a really big one we'll dive into. Whether it's a sweepstakes, whether it's a match campaign, whether it's K-State here doing, we hit 500 members, it unlocks this. We hit 1,000 members, it unlocks $1 million match. If you are getting those major gifts, think about anytime you get a major gift, even if it's 100K, how can we use that gift to then promote the grassroots? How can we collaborate between major gifts and grassroots funding? A lot of the time that does look like matched or unlocking or whatever it might be. But some other times that looks like part of that could go to running an event from that gift. It could go to an experience that people get access to. So with those events, There's the highest level that we all saw with the Kelsey brothers. But then it goes all the way down to just a meet and greet after spring practice. Making sure that your athletes that are getting paid to be ambassadors of your collective are really being ambassadors of your collective. I think that at the end of the day, we see events across the board, tailgates, open practices, pregame parties, formal galas, fundraising events. I think if collectives could, what I've seen the sweet spot being like one a quarter, no need to overdo it. And the goal being for all of these events that you sell sponsorship through it to cover your costs, so that it's not something where you're paying out of pocket to run all these events or to have all these activations. So one, it's given an experience, right? The whole reason why people are joining a membership is to get that access to athletes and get that exclusive feeling. So checking the box there. But two, whenever you're running an event, make people wish they were there. Put the content out, advertise it early, say, hey, you have to get in by this date in order to get access to this meet and greet. Have your athletes make videos promoting the event. Say, hey, I'm going to be here. If you want to be a part of it, you've got to be a member of the club. Like, getting that promotion early is just as important as the event itself, because you need to be using these events to drive memberships before it even happens. Or
And
an event, it's, hey, bring a friend, you can register at the door for 50% off. It's so it's the before promotion, the in event, and then it's after being like, oh shit, I wish I was there.
And I love what you said about this is a way to increase your inventory too. I mean, look at every single one of these presented by Subway, presented by Riverland, presented by the Touchdown Club of Athens, presented by the, SC. Yep. All of these things are just further inventory that you can then go out and engage with the commercial side of your community. And I don't know if we're going to get into that, just give it the time, but like, there's an entire separate side of this that, hey, you're engaging individuals. How do you engage the broader community in the form of businesses and organizations that also want to be, associated with the collective? This is a great way to kind of bring them into the fold on some of those things.
Absolutely. And I think that this piece, I highlighted it down here at the bottom too. Anything you own, events, content, that gives you something to sell, right? So the more content you create, the more events you run, the more face-to-face content you have with your fans, newsletters getting sent out, the more interaction you have with your fan, the more premium space you have to sell to sponsors to also engage with the demographic they're looking to engage with. And I think that's a basis of going back to on the website where I'm like, just push to joins. That's the number one thing. It's making sure that you have the monthly option, the annual option, and then the corporate option. Those are the three most basic boxes to check as you're setting up your membership platform, is having those options for the collectives and for the fans. And then I think this is a big piece too, is, we mentioned this before, but the good side of NIL. So tell these stories, use your athletes to be ambassadors for the community, get them out there. That's what I think there's part of the messaging of NIL is jump on board if you like to win, right? Like, that's something that the message boards are going to be posting. It's going to be like, how do we land this athlete that's in the portal right now? That's going to take care of itself. What we need to do a better job with as collectives is showcasing why these athletes at the university deserve your support, how they're pillars of our community and should be compensated for the good that they bring in. And I think that I had to put in this Caitlin Clark nod. Obviously, that's an exorbitant story about how good athletics departments bring in revenue to the city, but that goes all the way down to the smallest of towns, right? Is good athletics drive revenue, and that's a major conversation for corporate sponsors. Is good athletics programs, winning teams, drive people in for weekends. It drives people to your establishment. So I think that that's a big piece. And someone mentioned Learfield as part of this. I would say that comes up pretty much in every conversation as well, is how to if you do have a partnership with Learfield, how to use them to help tell those stories, whether it's a radio spot, whether it's an in-game spot, utilizing their assets and their platform to get that 50 seconds on the Jumbotron at a football game or at a basketball game. And something that I just want to comment on there is the importance of tracking the data of what's actually coming in from those spots. So in Basepath, you can use a referral code that's essentially a tracking code where you can make one specific for athletics Jumbotron spots. And you can see any joins or dollars that come in from that spot. Because I think a lot of the times we pay this money to put out a spot on at a football game, and there's not necessarily that back end tracking of making sure that the ROI is there. So using your resources, whether that be through Basepath or whatever, to do something once, track the data, and make sure that you're getting your return on your investment. So I think
On that
that's
on that Learfield
kind of
side, have you run into any issues where it's like, and this is not just Learfield, it's any of the MMR rights holders out there, like, hey, we've got a relationship with, we're I'll just use an example that probably won't happen, but like, hey, we're a Coke school. The collective wants to do a deal with Pepsi. Like, have you run into any of those kinds of like where there's tension between like the Learfield or like university corporate sponsorship side and the collective side?
not from the corporate sponsorship side. I think many people on this call can probably speak better to it than I
Yeah.
can. But I think where I see that banging heads is with the marketing assets and the marketing space, and getting space onto athletics platforms, whether that be email marketing, in-game campaigns, and then wanting to make sure you're paying for those,
Sure.
and making sure that but from the sponsorship side, um, of course you're going to respect the major sponsors of the athletic department, but I've actually seen more success of leveraging those sponsors to also support the collective and do
Yeah.
activations with the athletes. So I've seen
That
more success from that side than I've seen the opposite, because typically those major sponsors are already activating and see the
that's
importance of athlete integration.
I would agree. I think the trend is more collaboration than tension in a lot of those cases where you're seeing kind of those two parties coming together.
Yeah, and I think that you're going to see more of that. I think that this is a time where a lot of Learfield renegotiations are coming up. I think with the change of NIL laws, there's a little bit more leniency with what collectives can
Yeah.
be doing in a lot of
I think
states.
and I think they can be more involved and they feel like, I don't know, it felt like in some cases maybe the MMR rates, depending on whether or not they were a part of the university or not, like could have been sitting on the sidelines saying, hey, we don't want to be involved just to not incur any risk. Feels like a lot of the state laws where you're seeing the veil kind of lifted, those MMR rights partners seem to be kind of like coming to life in real time, in ways that I think they probably always were capable of, but are now that a lot of the liability and risk is gone, they're, stepping in and adding some pretty meaningful value.
Yeah, I honestly think that could be its own webinar in and of itself.
Yeah. Yeah.
Is that relationship that comes up every collective that's getting their boots off the ground. That's like one of the first thing that comes up is how to navigate that, from the sponsorship side, but also from the advertising side.
I was just talking to the guy who runs a collective that also works for Learfield. Uh, Maybe we'll bring him in for one of these.
I'd listen for sure.
Yeah.
All right, I think that's predominantly. I don't want to take up too much time. Like I
No,
said, that's a lot of overarching stuff, but hopefully
yeah.
a couple examples people can tap into.
No, appreciate it, Carlie. Super helpful. I do have a couple of questions that some that have come through and others that I've just collected over the past couple of days and weeks as people knew we were having this conversation. Some of these are a little bit more tactical, but just wanted to have you as kind of the expert go through them. As far as viability of tiers are concerned, like where do you see, and this was specifically for a mid-major, where do you see kind of the lowest and highest tiers for um, memberships that are, viable or going to
Yeah,
drive?
so I think you and I have talked about the average gift coming in is about that $36 range. So
Yeah.
making sure that your tiers support that. Um, I'm
It's
adamant.
funny. I did actually a little bit more
Yeah.
detailed research. I would say for the Power Four, you're looking in like the mid 40s. In the mid major, you're probably looking in the mid 30s, maybe even a little bit lower. So that's, I don't know why that is. It just, that's what the data shows. So yeah, to that end.
And what we've seen is most people do go with that lowest level, right? And then you have your handful of bigger donors that skew. So I always encourage people that if you don't want people paying $5 a month, don't offer that. Start around 20. That's something usually people can swallow. And then go up incrementally where you have four to six tiers. That's pretty much the standard that we've seen be able to convert. Any more than that gets cumbersome with making sure that the benefits support that. And then to that point, making sure that the benefits are easily scalable. I've had
So
a lot of
that was my
conversation.
literal next
Yeah.
question was on the fulfillment side. Let me read the actual question. What perks matter most, and what's kind of been your philosophy on the fulfillment requirements that you've needed in order to make these things grow?
Yeah. Obviously, with anything, customer onboarding is key, right?
Sure.
So, welcome packages, a welcome note, a welcome email, things where people can feel like, all right, I'm in. That regardless of
Sure,
what business you're
I got a
running.
hand signed note sent to Michigan from Mississippi when I joined the Grove. Like that means something. That was cool. It's on my refrigerator.
100%. So I think that that's that regardless of what business you're running, right? Customer
Yeah.
onboarding and making sure that they feel part of something immediately, whether that's access to the content that you're providing. I do appreciate a good welcome package, but making sure that's really lean. So you're running under $10 a welcome
Right.
package and you're not doing t-shirts because then you have to collect t-shirt sizes and it's not something that can scale when you get to that 4,000 member point that can and you're sending out all of these welcome packages that you have to then go through and make sure that Joe Smith has a small and then I think from that point a lot of what people are joining for aren't those nuanced things. It is the access to athletes. It's the insider information that they feel like they get by being part of the collective, whether that's through Zoom calls with the director of the collective, whether that's through meet and greets for the athletes, whether that's they get to buy their kids a t-shirt at a 50% discount or whatever it is for a short period of time. Um, all of these things that I would recommend for perks are things that can be automated. Really, really,
Sure.
when you come down to it, ensure that all of your perks can be automated, or if it isn't something that can be automated, like a video from an athlete, that's worth
Right.
the
Yeah.
tier that it's
Don't give
for.
that away at the $10 tier.
Yeah, yeah,
You're gonna spend more than
that
10
should be
bucks.
your top 5 or 6. Something where you have to get a signed poster, something where you have to put in effort around it, making sure that that's something where it's $100 or more a month, that makes it worth it. But it's really that quick onboarding and the access to events that I've seen have tipped the scale for collectives.
Heading into this kind of dead period, we're kind of coming out of the winter sports. We're in like the, I don't know, the regular season of the spring sports, obviously, as we get into the playoffs, and then coming out of that into, just the summer. Like, how are you helping collectives to kind of get ready for, I don't know, feels like hibernation, maybe too strong a word,
Yeah,
but you know, we've got months between like playoff for baseball and softball and football, like
yeah.
coming on the other side. Like, what are the ways in which collectives should be thinking about how they are, you know, still maintaining some of that connectivity with their audience and still trying to drive memberships as best they can, without having the really kind of more organic, natural events that are going to be, getting people excited.
Yeah, it's like you've been part of all my meetings this morning. I think a big thing that I'm pressing and hammering over the next month is shoot content, collect it now. This is your time when athletes are going to be on campus. Get them in front of a camera, have a conversation about NIL, and hold on to it for a little bit. Like you can post that organically, spread that out over the next 3 months, have a different get 10 have do it with 10 athletes and then have a different athlete each week. That gets you through 10 weeks of content to stay relevant. I think that's a really big piece right now is how do you stay relevant when you don't have the ebbs and flows of a sports season. Obviously there's still going to be a couple more weeks of some portal news that could trickle your way or not, but we can't be dependent on that. So big piece of advice: before a lot of people go away, shoot some content, have stuff stocked up to use over the next few weeks. To do an end of the year push, do an end of the year campaign, do a graduation campaign, do something where you're trying to hit a specific number by the end of the school year, the end of the where
Yeah.
before the kids leave. I think that's a major push. And then something that is happening over the summer that you can leverage membership access is camps, is community initiatives. So we're seeing a lot of athletes who should be running camps in their hometowns. They should be running camps. Obviously, a lot of athletes are on campus throughout the summer. So doing a camp with them on campus where they can make money by running the camp and coaching, and members can get a discounted price to that camp. So figuring out ways to be involved in the community while it's a little bit slower for these athletes, while they're just working out in the morning and then have the afternoon free or taking a couple classes, summer classes. So utilizing the people you have on campus, running camps, and then also making sure there's ambassadors for their community. And then just get ready. I think football, as we know, is a major, major push, and that should start mid-July. Come up with your pregame campaign. Come up with your giving week that you're going to do before football season starts. Have that all ready to go so that you can flip the switch come August, when the buzz starts coming back onto campus.
Carlie, I cannot thank you enough for taking the time, truly. For those of you that are interested, and I know I've already gotten a handful of texts as this thing has been going of how to get with Carlie, we're going to pass along her information as we send out kind of the recap of this stuff. There are very few folks that I feel personally, strongly enough about to recommend them to our customers. Carlie is on a list of maybe two that we do. And it is truly because the work speaks for itself. She's had tremendous success. Obviously, the Grow, which is incredibly public in a lot of these other ones that we didn't get a chance to dive as deep into, but are seeing some really, really exciting growth with her support. So cannot thank you enough. If anyone else has any other questions or follow-ups, like feel free to shoot them over. We'll be looping back with Carlie regularly and happy to get answers back over to you guys. But Carlie, thank you again. Really, really appreciate the time.
Thank you, Thomas. I appreciate it and look forward to meeting and speaking with everyone kind of further.
You're the
Bye, guys.
best. Thank you.
Later.
Yeah.